J. Cole has been one of the ever-present names in mainstream hip-hop for the best part of 15 years. Between his debut album in 2011, right up until now with his long-anticipated Fall Off project still supposedly on the way, Cole has cultivated a dedicated fan base with consistent results. Part of the so-called Big Three of modern hip-hop, although that is now hotly contested after this year's insane rap civil war where Cole prophetically backed out at the perfect moment, he has managed to somewhat keep up with the commercial and critical juggernauts of Drake and Kendrick Lamar respectively. And that's thanks to his sound and approach to rap rooted in its relatability, humility, and day-to-day observations. And regardless of whether people love his music or not, it's very easy to see why J. Cole resonates with so many people. He's the everyman of hip-hop with a backstory that so many can see themselves in. Someone raised by a single parent, getting by, going to high school, going to university, and working a string of regular jobs before finally chasing his dream. Every single album he has released in his career has gone to #1 in the US. They're also all platinum certified at a minimum. That longevity is not something to be sniffed at all. However, whilst I am a fan of most of these projects, I actually happen to think his latest album, The Off Season, is one of his strongest albums to date. I think that some of the most fascinating material of his career comes before all of this, while he was still trying to quote unquote make it. It may be the nostalgia talking, but for me, the 3 to 4 year period leading up to the Sideline Story is my favorite stretch of Cole projects to this day, and sowed the seeds for what Cole would blossom into. 17 years ago, a young J. Cole had already moved to New York for school. He had posted up outside of Jay-Z's Rock the Mic studio with his creative partner Ebe, hoping to get Jay to listen to a beat he'd created for Jay-Z's American Gangster album. According to J. Cole, Jay-Z saw him and said, "Man, I don't want that."
Went to, and I told Ebe, matter of fact, I'm like, yo, you know what? I bet he's probably gonna be at the studio tonight. You know, I bet.
Baseline Studio.
This was, at this time they was at Rock the Mic. I knew, I had read this. You know, I'm stalking online.
In the Queen's paper you read.
Yeah, so I'm like, okay, let's just go. I had a feeling, man. So we hopped the train. We went there. We got a little bottle. 2 hours later, we see this black Phantom turn the corner. And it's kind of like you just feel the energy of Hova. Walks up to the building, and I'm like trying to build up the nerve to go up to him with the CD.
After you waited all that time in the rain.
Waited all that time in the rain, and I'm like, yo, I don't even know what to say. Yo, Jay, nah, I definitely couldn't. I couldn't muster up an So I'm like, yo, Jay, I got this. Like, what is this? Like, what is this? I'm like,
he said, what is this?
He's like, nah, he didn't. I don't even think he said, what is this? He might have looked at it and he was like, I don't want this shit.
Oh.
Although it didn't go the way Cole had intended, he still had a whole CD of beats he'd made and used that for his first mixtape, The Come Up. Over half of the tracks are self-produced, a trend that will continue throughout the rest of his career. Simba, the first proper track on the project and effectively Cole's debut single, is a compelling display of Cole's hunger, drive, and pure determination to be signed and to make it. The entire ethos and energy of the mixtape is on display on Simba, whether that's on the beats he's produced himself or from hip-hop classics. He raps on Nas's You're the Man with one of the grittiest flows and deliveries on the entire project as well. Taking on any Nas beat, regardless of what stage you are in your career, is not easy, and whilst Cole's verses are raw and unrefined, the pure intensity of his delivery is undeniable. Throw It Up is another highlight for me, with this being one of the 12 tracks produced by Cole himself. The sampling is relatively simple, and over time you can definitely track Cole's producing becoming more and more refined, but that's part of the appeal of tracks like this. Getting G's like Disney flicks is the tongue-in-cheek kind of bars that I'm kind of thankful J. Cole hasn't really let go of. And that's where the personal appeal angle comes in. The subject matter for Cole has largely remained the same from these songs until now, of course with a few exceptions. Some people might point to that as a point of stagnation and playing it safe, others see it as a marker of authenticity. At the end of the day, it is a matter of taste and preference, but I'd have to say that at the bare minimum, it points to Cole being an intentional and down-to-earth artist. As previously mentioned, Cole was intent on Jay-Z hearing some of these beats, so it's only fitting he raps on a Jay-Z beat. In fact, he raps on what I think is to this day the best ever beat for a Jay-Z song, Dead Presidents. I was like 11 or 12 when I first heard the come up, so this was actually the first time I'd heard this beat prior to hearing the original Jay-Z song. Cole's verses are self-aware, socially conscious, and pretty heartfelt. Its scope is wider than most songs on here, managing to touch on racial inequality, financial greed, and once again, the dream to make it as a rapper. Thematically, this wouldn't sound out of place on a project like KOD or For Your Eyes Only with that raw element intact. My personal highlights of this tape come in succession towards the end, starting with Carolina on My Mind. To this day, I love those horn samples and the dusty aesthetic of the instrumental. It's soulful, smooth, and an early display of Cole's ability to write both compelling and catchy songs simultaneously. The next song is my favorite from the tape and remains one of my favorite J. Cole songs ever, even after all of these years. Can't Cry samples Millie Jackson's If Loving You Is Wrong, I Don't Want to Be Right, keeping the sample mainly intact. On the song, Cole raps about death, optimism, job struggles, legal corruption, and more. His observational, relatable view of his world here is what continues to resonate with his fans almost 20 years later. His style, talent, and production values have of course progressed from this point, but the ethos and intent remains virtually unchanged. And just a couple of years later, some of those dreams he was rapping about achieving on this tape would come to fruition. As many J. Cole fans will know, Lights Please, which is one of the tracks from the warm-up, is arguably the most important song of J. Cole's career. It's the song that eventually led him to sign to Jay-Z's Roc Nation label as its first ever signee, in fact. He had intended for Lights Please to feature on his debut album, which would eventually come true with its inclusion on Cold War The Sideline Story in 2011. Admittedly, I don't think this song has aged amazingly well lyrically, but what I do think it does is show J. Cole's consistent approach to storytelling and structure. The attempt to frame real-world problems, heavy ones at that, through the lens of the relatable everyman is the appeal to Lights Please, and it's easy to see why this is the song that convinced Jay-Z to sign him. Similarly to the come up, the warm-up is a mixture of Cole's own produced beats alongside him rapping on hip-hop classics, including Kanye's Last Call, Royal Flush by Big Boi, and Jay-Z's Dead Presidents once again. The warm-up continues with a lot of the same themes as the come up, although infinitely more polished and a lot more focused. You can track a really clear progression between the two projects. Welcome, the tape's first full-length track, is a much more subdued song than Simba, for example, on the previous tape.
I'm sipping liquor for the pain, pouring liquor for the slain. Nothing else can do the trick like hard liquor to the brain. Fall victim to the game, all this money we spent.
A meditative take on fame and alcohol abuse. To this day, Welcome remains a personal favorite of mine. It also sets the tone for the mixtape that is considerably more somber and blue than the come up. Not to say that the hunger and aggression isn't present, as it most certainly is, especially on songs like Grown Simba and Till Infinity, but these are the exceptions rather than the rule. Dreams, which samples Kanye's Drive Slow, is one of the best displays of Cole's conceptual songwriting ability. Framed as a desperate attempt at idealized love, of course it shares many parallels with his relationship to rap music and the industry itself. Very clearly inspired by Eminem's Stan, the song devolves from a crush and infatuation to stalking and fantasizing about murdering the lover of the woman you like. So overtly irrational that would be impossible to take the song literally, and if anyone does, please seek help. But it's the kind of focused conceptual storytelling that I think he should do a lot more of, as he clearly has a knack for it. Coupling that with a catchy hook and strong beat, this is a significant step up in quality and efficiency from the previous project. Losing My Balance is one of the most nostalgic songs on here for me. I remember having this on constant repeat on my bus rides to and from school. Again, as an adult 15 years after its release, I'm not gonna lie and say this song has aged amazingly well bar for bar, particularly the first verse, but the structure and sincerity of the song is what I still think is admirable. A kind of triptych tale of struggle. You can tell it comes from the right place. It's subdued, somber, and a genuine attempt at dealing with temptation and societal ills. The sample itself, which is a song called Balance by Sarah Tavares, remains amazing to me to this day.
Como vi dançar no Zimbabwe. Quero também contigo xingaie. Uma dança nova, mistura do samba e samba de mambo com rumba. Tua mão na minha e a minha na tua. Balanceia, balançaia.
The Badness is one of the most underrated J. Cole songs ever. I think it might be a top 10, 15 J. Cole song. And it's for the sheer fact that it's so simple and surprisingly subtle. It's a song about existentialism, paranoia, race relations, and internal struggle. In 2009, Cole himself said that his verse was his favorite he'd written up to that point.
The verse I got on The Badness, a song called The Badness, which is real, man, it's like real, it's deep. I don't want to like dig myself up, but it's pretty deep, just on a life analysis level. And I just like it so much because it flows so easy, like it was easy to write. You wouldn't be able to tell from listening to it, like, oh man, that's pretty deep. But it just flowed off one night, like probably within like 10 minutes or something like that. So yeah, that was cool.
It's just such a shame that the song is so short and we only get that single verse from Cole. I Get Up is another example of his brand of humble, down-to-earth relatability, with one of his best singing performances on the warm-up too. After this point, his career and profile was skyrocketing. He would go on to land features with Jay-Z and Wale, he performed with Wiz Khalifa, he was on Miguel's debut single, and was in the process of making his long-awaited debut album, which would eventually come out in September 2011. But before that, we would get one more Cole project, a project that is now viewed as one of the best mixtapes of the blog era, and is still regarded as one of Cole's best ever, mixtape, album, or otherwise. Friday Night Lights is a certified classic to me, there's no doubt about it. I remember this being at the top of the DatPiff homepage for what felt like forever. In my head, this is an album, not a mixtape, as most of the tracks were originally intended to be on his upcoming debut.
You can go to YouTube for that, that's not really what we're here for. I want to tell y'all the story behind this whole project and why it even exists. So after the warm-up was out, I felt like I was ready to go. I had this album, I had all these songs that was like album ready. I had my whole album work. Me and Eve used to ride around listening to the album. But time goes by, 3 months, 6 months, a year. Every interview, every time I see the fans, they're like, yo, where the fucking album at? I start feeling that pressure. Couldn't get that release date. So I'm saying all this to say, one night, I wrote these raps. And the next day we got back to New York from doing a show, and I was like, yo, we gotta go record this shit. So we went to the studio up in Times Square, and I laid this shit down right here. And I decided that night that enough was enough. I didn't want niggas to think I was falling off and slacking, so I decided that moment, I'm gonna drop a whole fucking project on niggas. And I say all that to say,
as label heads didn't believe it would sell particularly well. This was the project that got everyone excited about J. Cole as a mainstream prospect, and I think it's fair to say his fans feel like he has lived up to that potential. The somber piano intro, which is actually very similar to the 2014 Forest Hills Drive intro, and Too Deep for the intro are the perfect mood setters. Too Deep for the intro's sample alone makes it a classic, sampling Erykah Badu's Jay Dilla produced Didn't You Know. I saw J. Cole live a couple of years back at a festival, and when he performed Too Deep for the intro, I lost my shit. However, I seem to be the only one in my section that knew the song, which kind of pains me because every J. Cole fan needs to hear this project. Too Deep for the intro has Cole employing clever witty bars, a variety of sticky flows and punchlines, and I hate to overuse the word, but a hunger that I don't think has ever been stronger. After that, we get another all-timer Cole song with Before I'm Gone, upping the intensity from the previous track.
I hit the weed until my second last time will be my last. I don't trust my own niggas, now my mind racing fast. Got my foot up on the gas, got 100 on the dash. If the police wanna pull me, I ain't stopping for they ass.
The beat is up there with Cole's best, the kinetic energy of the track is palpable, and again, so many standout bars and interesting flows, towing the line between hilarious tongue-in-cheek lyrics and bleak depictions of life struggles. The 1-2 of the opening tracks are not a joke. Before I'm Gone is the soundtrack to me rushing to the school gates as a 13-year-old, hoping I'm not late for school, and I do appreciate that. For me, a lot of the appeal of this tape is tied to my nostalgia for it, but I do think it holds up alongside his other more recent projects. I'd go so far to actually call it his strongest work to date. As with the preceding mixtapes, most of this is produced by Cole himself, with him really growing with his production chops. You Got It samples Janelle Monáe and actually introduced me to her music, is one of the best examples of J. Cole's burgeoning pop appeal. A bright, summery beat, extremely catchy chorus, light-hearted, love-struck punchlines, and an amazingly interpolated sample. Conceptually, it's not doing anything crazy or revolutionary, it's basically an infatuation song, but it's so carefree and infectious that you can't help but just repeat it over and over again. Even the Wale verse, someone I'm not the biggest fan of, works perfectly on here. In the Morning features on here with a verse from Drake. Nothing on this planet screams 2010 more to me than this song. Both artists on the come up, about to blow up, on another song about being 100% love struck. Of course, in the context of 2024's events, watching the two of them trade bars on a song like this seems strange now. Straight after this, we get one of the darker songs with Two-Face, continuing some of the themes of the warm-up with inner monologue conflict and paranoia. Friday Night Lights also has Illmatic, which was actually going to be the original title of the tape, referencing Nas's Illmatic. J. Cole raps over what is one of the best rap beats ever made, Devil in a New Dress, which at the time of release was still a new song. Rapping over this beat, you have to bring absolute heat, and Cole spits a couple of his best ever verses. He raps as if it's the epilogue to an already 20-year career, with a focus, intensity, and perspective. I actually heard this song before hearing Devil in a New Dress for the first time in 2010, and the fact that I didn't think it was anyone else's before is a testament to how strong it is. We get a smooth R&B mashup with an Aaliyah sample on Best Friend, classic Kanye style sampling on Cost Me a Lot, and a pretty addictive love song with Love Me Not. Some of the darker moments on the tape are also highlights, particularly Premeditated Murder, which remains a cult favorite.
2 options. It's like Apollo. Lights, please. Premeditated murder.
J. Cole reflects on a legacy that is still forming in real time, questions his relationship with fame and what he will leave behind. A common through line on these songs are paranoia and dueling interests, which Premeditated Murder synthesizes into a single track. SeaWorld is an inherently moody song, paying tribute to a girl from Cole's hometown who had gone missing, in fact. He uses that case as the flint to critique wider societal ills and also rappers' false images. What's interesting is Cole's analysis of over-commercialized rappers quote-unquote selling out, which is an argument that was levied against Cole himself when his debut album dropped, and Cole would eventually address that on the Born Sinner track Let Nas Down. Farewell continues the somber streak, with Cole most directly addressing what his legacy will be and how he will be viewed once he has passed away. It almost functions as a self-written eulogy, with Cole declaring that he's nothing but just a man. The self-awareness and again flat-out raw nature of most of these songs are the appeal and stand in contrast to some of J. Cole's later projects. I think that's why Friday Night Lights remains so beloved by Cole fans to this day, and myself included, continue to pray to hear this project on DSPs as soon as possible. But with some of those samples that would need to be cleared, that doesn't seem likely anytime soon. In 2024, J. Cole is at a strange crossroads in his career. Considering how long he's been at the top of the game, he can no longer realistically call himself a middle child. He's now a veteran, and with the Kendrick-Drake situation still fresh in everyone's mind, nobody is sure where Cole goes from here. The Fall Off is still due for release, and I actually don't think the Kendrick-Drake situation should affect it too much, considering J. Cole removed himself from the beef. What I hope for is that same energy and rawness from his first mixtapes, which we definitely saw glimpses of on the off-season. But nevertheless, those first 3 mixtapes represent a moment in time of pure ambition and hunger for Cole that I think goes down in history.